I wanted to protect my house. Instead, I saw what I really needed protection from. That's the irony. You think you're guarding against the outside world, the strangers, the burglars, the nameless threats. But the real danger is sometimes the one sharing your dinner table. For most of our marriage, I wouldn't have called myself paranoid. If anything, I was the opposite. I trusted too easily, especially when it came to Laura. We'd been together 9 years, married for 7, and while we had our share of arguments, nothing ever screamed, "This is going to blow up." We had our routines down to muscle memory. I left for work by 7:15 every morning, coffee in my travel mug, lunch packed the night before. Laura worked from home for a marketing agency, so most mornings when I kissed her goodbye, she was still in pajamas, laptop open, sipping tea. Evenings were predictable too. I'd get home, we'd cook together or order takeout, then watch a show before bed. It wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it was steady. And for a guy like me, steady was good. Sure, there were small cracks if I looked close enough, nights where she seemed distracted, weekends where she claimed she just needed some alone time, and I'd go fishing or work on the garage so she could have space. Her phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now always within reach, face down. But I brushed it off. Everyone gets a little more private over time, right? I wasn't the jealous type. I didn't snoop, didn't pry, didn't demand explanations for every late meeting or weekend errand. I told myself trust was the glue that kept things together. But as I'd learn, sometimes the glue's already gone, and you just don't notice until everything falls apart. The cameras were supposed to be about security, just an extra layer of peace of mind, a way to keep an eye on deliveries or check in when we traveled. At least that's what I thought at the time. I had no idea that a few pieces of plastic and glass would tear my life wide open. And it all started one Friday afternoon with a neighbor's offhand comment that stuck in my head longer than it should have. That neighbor's comment gnawed at me longer than I care to admit. It was tossed out casually, something about package thefts on the next street over, motion alerts catching a couple of kids checking car handles at night, and then he moved on to mowing his lawn, like he hadn't just planted a seed in my head. All evening it sat there, a small, insistent thought. We live in a good neighborhood, but good isn't the same as safe. Saturday morning, I woke up with a plan. It wasn't impulsive so much as inevitable, like the way you finally fix a dripping faucet after weeks of telling yourself you'll get to it. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and mapped out where cameras would actually be useful. Front door, obviously. Back door, because that's the one people forget. Inside, one that could see the big slice of our downstairs. Living room, dining area, the hallway that leads from the garage, like a wide-angle bodyguard. Nothing in the bedroom, nothing in the bathrooms. I wasn't trying to turn our home into a surveillance bunker. I just wanted coverage where strangers walk if strangers ever came. Laura padded in around 9, hair tied up, oversized sweatshirt swallowing her frame. She yawned, reached for a mug, and asked what I was doing with the tape measure and the little pile of anchors and screws on the table. I told her I was installing a few cameras, that it might even shave something off our insurance. She shrugged, the kind of shrug that meant, do what you want. No argument, no curiosity, no, hey, where will these point? Just a small nod, and her attention sliding back to her phone. I took the nod as permission, and not a warning, which I see differently now. I started outside because it felt like the least intimate place to put a lens. The front door trim had a solid stud behind it, and the angle from the top right corner would catch the steps, the porch, and the driveway in one frame. I drilled the pilot hole slow, vacuuming the dust as I went so I wouldn't leave a mess. The back door camera was trickier. The eaves curved down, and the siding was set on a slight bow, but a longer bracket brought it flush. I tested the signal with my phone, adjusted the pitch until the motion zone hugged the gate and not the swaying maple branches, and locked it down. Inside, I stood in the middle of the living room with my hands on my hips, trying to see the space the way a camera would. The living room flowed into the dining area we never used unless her parents visited, then turned into the hallway, past the laundry closet, and into the garage.
From above the bookshelf on the far wall, a single lens could take it all in without shouting "camera" every time you walked past. I could run the wire down the corner, behind a plant, staple the line tight along the baseboard, and tuck the excess behind the TV console. It would look intentional, not paranoid. I kept thinking about privacy, not as some abstract idea, but as a promise to myself, and in a smaller way, to us. I disabled anything near the bedroom door. I made sure the living room camera didn't catch the hallway to the bathroom straight on. I set the audio to record, then second-guessed it, then left it on. If someone broke in, their voice could be useful. That was my logic. It felt clean at the time. Setup always takes longer than you think. There's the ladder up, ladder down, the inevitable hunk for a pencil that's in your back pocket. There's the little dance with Wi-Fi, where every device claims it's connected except the one you actually need online. I named the network Grid, like I was christening boats. Front, back, living. I set strong passwords because that's what you're supposed to do, and I turned on two-factor like every article tells you and every person ignores until something goes wrong. I kept an eye on the app as each feed blinked to life. The front door came first, crisp enough to read a license plate if it rolled to a stop. The backyard feed loaded next, a crisp rectangle showing the gate, the patch of sun that slides across the grass by late afternoon, and the corner where the trash bins sit like loyal soldiers. The living room took a few extra tries, as if the house didn't want to be watched from the inside, but then it settled into a wide, quiet frame that made the room look bigger than it feels. Couch on the right, coffee table with a nick in the corner from when my nephew climbed it and slipped, the hallway like a runway leading out of view. It felt both ordinary and strangely official, like my life had been given an ID badge. Laura drifted through once while I was testing motion zones, moving from the kitchen toward the office we set up in the spare bedroom. She didn't look at the little green LED winking above the bookshelf. She didn't ask what the field of view would catch or whether the footage stored on the cloud or on a card. I told myself that meant she trusted me. In hindsight, I'm not sure it meant anything at all. By late afternoon, the installation turned into a small ritual. Mount, level, tighten, back up, make micro adjustments, walk through the frame holding my phone, confirm there were no blind spots where a person could move without being seen. I configured alerts so my phone wouldn't buzz every time a tree swayed, but would ping if something crossed the threshold after dark. I set schedules, weekday versus weekend, and carved out a noon to 2 quiet zone because the mail carrier hated being filmed and I didn't want to train my brain to ignore the chime. When it was done, I sat on the couch under the eye of the living room camera and scrolled through the app like a kid who'd just finished building a treehouse. 3 small windows into the same life I'd lived the day before, except now there was a record. I told myself that was the whole point, not to change anything, just to have proof if something ever went sideways. Proof that the package was dropped off, proof that the gate was closed, proof that we were careful people who didn't leave their doors unlocked and hope for the best. I didn't know it, but I had just given myself a mirror I couldn't turn away from. And for a little while, just long enough to build confidence, I treated it like a toy. I walked into frame and waved. I opened the front door and checked how quickly the sensor woke up. I timed the delay on the push notifications from porch to phone. It was harmless. It was even fun in a nerdy, practical way. There's a special kind of relief that comes after you finish a project around the house. You put the ladder back where it belongs, coil the extension cord, tuck the toolbox on the garage shelf, and feel like the structure around you has become a little sturdier. That's how it felt that evening. Like I had given our home an extra layer of skin. I fell asleep telling myself I'd only check the feeds when I needed to. Of course, the first thing I did the next morning was open the app just to see what I'd missed while we slept. That's how the testing them for fun part started. And that's how the rest of it began. I didn't pull the trigger on the cameras right away. For weeks, the idea just sat in the back of my mind like a song you can't get rid of. One of those thoughts you keep circling back to without meaning to. At first, it was just casual curiosity. I'd catch myself browsing hardware store flyers or scrolling through tech blogs when I had a spare minute. Not because I need them, I told myself, just looking. Then, one rainy Saturday afternoon, the decision made itself. I was in the garage reorganizing my tools, something I only ever did when I was trying to avoid doing actual work, when I noticed the side gate latch was bent. Not broken, but it looked like someone had pulled it too hard. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe the neighbor's kid. Still, it was enough to nudge me from thinking to doing. I went online and ordered a mid-range system, 4 wireless cameras, night vision, motion detection, and live feed from my phone. Nothing fancy, but enough to cover every vulnerable spot: front porch, backyard, garage, and living room. The kit arrived 2 days later in a brown box that felt heavier than it looked. Rose wasn't home when I set them up. She'd taken the boys to soccer practice, so I had the whole afternoon to work in peace. It was almost fun, drilling mounts into the siding, threading cables through the walls, adjusting angles until I had the perfect view. There was something strangely satisfying about seeing the world from above, like I'd given myself a set of hidden eyes.
Once the cameras were up, I ran a test from my phone. The front porch cam caught a delivery guy dropping off a package. The backyard feed showed the maple tree swaying in the wind, its branches flickering like shadows against the grass. And the living room? Empty, still, and perfectly ordinary. I should have stopped there. Should have patted myself on the back for a job well done, closed the app, and gone about my life. But there was something hypnotic about that grainy, silent footage. It felt like holding a secret, my own private window into a world that no one else knew I could see. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. I thought it made me safer. I didn't know it was going to change everything. For the first week, the cameras were nothing more than a novelty. I'd open the app during my lunch break just to check if the mail had come or if the neighbor's cat was prowling around the backyard again. Sometimes I'd pull the feed up on the TV for a laugh, like I was running my own low-budget reality show called My Quiet, Uneventful Life. It was oddly addictive, not because anything exciting was happening, but because I liked the reassurance. Every time I saw that empty couch in the living room or the front porch bathed in sunlight with no strangers lurking, it felt like proof that the world was exactly as I wanted it to be: calm, predictable, safe. Rose didn't care much about them, or at least she acted like she didn't. If she noticed me scrolling through the app at night, she'd just ask, "Anything interesting?" And I'd tell her, "Just the mailman or a squirrel doing parkour on the fence." She'd smile faintly and go back to whatever she was doing. Sometimes I'd test the motion alerts just for the hell of it. I'd walk across the living room at different speeds, wave at the lens, sit on the couch, and stand up again just to see how fast the notification came through on my phone. I even timed it: 3 seconds from movement to buzz. Not bad. The more I used them, the more natural it became. Checking the feeds was like glancing at a clock. You didn't even think about it, you just did it. Then, one night, about 2 weeks in, I opened the app out of sheer boredom while watching TV in the bedroom. Rose had said she was going to the store for milk and a few things for dinner. I wasn't expecting to see anything, but the front porch cam showed her pulling into the driveway, with the milk in hand, smiling faintly as she unlocked the door. I watched her walk inside on the living room feed, set the groceries down, then check her phone for a long moment before heading to the kitchen. It was mundane, ordinary, and yet I sat there watching like it was a movie I'd seen 100 times but couldn't turn off. That's when I realized these cameras weren't just about protecting the house anymore. They were about knowing, about having the kind of certainty you can't get from words alone. And I didn't know it yet, but that certainty was going to turn into something else. Something I couldn't ignore once I saw it. It was a Wednesday night, one of those midweek stretches where nothing much happens. Rose had gone to bed early, claiming a headache, and I was left in the living room with the TV muted and my phone in my hand. Out of habit, I opened the camera app. No alerts, no pings, just the usual quiet. For reasons I can't even explain, I clicked into the stored footage tab. I'd never done that before, not seriously. I'd only watched live feeds, quick check-ins, a glance here or there. But that night, I thought, why not? Let's see what the house does when I'm not paying attention. The app broke the clips into neat little boxes, each one a moment the cameras had picked up motion. The timestamps stretched across days. Most were harmless: me coming home from work, Rose taking the trash out, the boys running through the living room after school. But there was something strangely hypnotic about seeing it all play out in silence, sped up just enough to make life look mechanical.
I fast-forwarded through Sunday afternoon, watching us both puttering around, me in the garage, her folding laundry. Monday morning showed her in the kitchen, hair tied back, scrolling through her phone between sips of coffee. Tuesday evening had me pulling into the driveway, Rose sitting on the couch with her laptop open. Everything normal. I almost closed the app. Almost. But then I spotted a clip from the middle of the previous Thursday. It stood out because I was at work that day, from dawn until well after dark, and Rose had told me she was working from home. I tapped it without thinking. The feed flickered to life. There was Rose, moving quickly across the living room. She looked different, dressed better than she usually did for a day in the home office. Hair done, makeup on. She crossed the frame twice, carrying what looked like wine glasses into the kitchen. I felt a little twinge of curiosity, but brushed it off. Maybe she'd had a friend over. Maybe her sister dropped by. Still, my thumb hovered over the next clip, wondering what else I might see. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. How the tiny green LED above the bookshelf winked in the dim light, recording everything whether I was there to watch or not. And for the first time since installing them, I realized the cameras knew more about my life than I did. It was a Saturday. I remember clearly because I'd made plans to meet some friends for a late fishing trip. We were leaving after dinner, planning to drive out to the lake and stay until sunrise. Rose had told me earlier in the week she'd be going out too, something about a girls' night with coworkers at a wine bar across town. We'd kissed goodbye around 6. She was dressed for the night, hair loose, a black dress that clung in all the right places, heels she almost never wore unless she wanted attention. I told her she looked beautiful, and she smiled in a way that seemed genuine. I didn't think twice about it. By 8, I was sitting in my buddy's truck, gear in the back, the road ahead dark except for the sweep of our headlights. My phone buzzed with a motion alert from the living room camera. At first, I ignored it, probably the boys. But no, they were with my parents that night. Maybe the cat. Another alert came less than a minute later. This time I opened the app. The feed loaded slowly on the spotty backroad signal, but when it finally sharpened, my stomach dropped. It was Rose, standing in the living room. She wasn't supposed to be home. She was taking off her coat, tossing her purse onto the couch. Then, like she'd done it 100 times before, she disappeared toward the front door and came back with someone else. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. I didn't recognize him. They sat on the couch, close enough that their knees brushed. She poured them each a glass of wine, from the same set I'd watched her carry into the kitchen on that Thursday clip. They talked for a while, leaning toward each other, laughing quietly. Then, he put his hand on her knee. And she didn't move it. My buddy was talking beside me, the hum of the truck filling the silence, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat thudding in my ears as I watched. I didn't say a word to him, didn't say I needed to turn back. I just sat there staring at the feed, watching my life change. The camera's wide-angle lens made the living room look bigger than it really was, but there was no mistaking how close they were sitting. My couch, the one Rose and I had picked out together, the one we'd curled up on for movie nights, where she'd fallen asleep against my chest 100 times, now had a stranger's arm draped casually along the backrest, his fingers almost brushing her shoulder. They weren't in any rush. It wasn't frantic or sloppy like some guilty spur-of-the-moment thing. No, they looked comfortable, familiar, as if this wasn't the first time he'd been there. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Not that polite, half-present smile she'd give me when I told her about my day, but a real one. Eyes lit, head tilted slightly, laughing at whatever he was saying. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not the kind of anger that makes you explode, but the kind that freezes you in place. My buddy was still talking about bait and water conditions, completely unaware that on my phone screen, my marriage was sitting in the center of that camera frame, unraveling. The guy leaned forward, said something, and Rose reached up to tuck her hair behind her ear. A small gesture, but one I knew meant she was nervous and flattered at the same time. He took that as his opening and let his hand slide from the couch to her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She didn't move away. They kept talking for another few minutes, sipping wine, his hand lingering there like it belonged. And then, without hesitation, she shifted closer. Their knees pressed together. She rested her arm against his leg. My couch. My living room. My wife. I sat there in the passenger seat of that truck, staring at my phone while the road blurred past, feeling like the walls of my own home were closing in, and I wasn't in it. I should have turned the feed off, should have told myself I'd seen enough, that I could deal with it later when I was calmer. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there in my buddy's truck, the glow of my phone lighting up my lap, and I kept watching. The camera's microphone didn't pick up much from across the room. Just the occasional muffled laugh or the clink of a glass against the coffee table, but I didn't need sound to understand what I was seeing. They talked like they had all the time in the world. She leaned in when he spoke, her head tilted toward him like he was telling her something important, something she wanted to remember. His hand moved from her shoulder to her thigh. She didn't move it away, and then, as casual as if she were reaching for the remote, she slid her own hand over his. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. I wasn't just seeing an indiscretion. I was watching a line get crossed in real time.
He shifted, turning toward her, and she laughed again, that open, easy laugh I hadn't heard in months. Then his hand cupped her cheek, and she didn't hesitate. She leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't quick. It wasn't tentative. It was slow and sure, the kind of kiss that said this wasn't the first time. Something in me went completely still. Not numb. No, numb would have been a mercy. I felt every second stretch, every detail etch itself into my mind. The way her shoulders relaxed into him, the way her hands slid up to his neck, the way they stayed like that for what felt like forever before finally pulling apart. They talked a little more, their bodies angled toward each other, and then she took his hand and led him out of the living room toward the hallway. Toward our bedroom. The camera feed didn't follow them there, but I didn't need to see the rest to know exactly what was happening. And still, I couldn't stop watching that empty living room, waiting for them to come back. The logical part of me, the one that handles bills on time, checks tire pressure before road trips, and always makes sure the back door is locked, told me to confront her the second I walked through our front door. But I didn't go home that night. I stayed on that fishing trip, like nothing had happened. I baited hooks, cast lines, laughed at my buddy's dumb jokes. On the outside, I was the same man who'd left home just hours earlier. Inside, though, everything had shifted. It wasn't shock anymore. Shock hits fast and hard, then fades. This was something heavier, colder. The kind of weight you carry in your gut that changes how you breathe. I kept telling myself not to react while my blood was boiling. If I confront her now, she'd see anger. And anger gives her something to fight against. Some way to twist the story, to make it about how I handled it instead of what she did. No, I needed to be certain, collected, methodical. So I waited. I got home late the next afternoon. The house looked exactly as it had in the camera feed. The throw blanket draped over the couch arm, the wine glasses gone from the table, the faint smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. Rose was in the kitchen making coffee, like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me, asked how the trip went, kissed my cheek. My mind replayed the image of her kissing that man in the same room we were standing in. I kept my voice calm, casual, told her the trip was fine, that I was tired. I didn't mention the cameras. Not yet. That night, I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. She slept easily. I didn't sleep at all, because I knew that the next time I brought it up, I wouldn't be asking questions. I'd be showing her answers. I waited 3 days. 3 long, calculated days where I carried on like nothing had changed, even though every glance at her felt like staring through glass. On the morning I decided to confront her, I woke before sunrise.
My mind was too loud for sleep anyway. I made coffee, sat at the dining table, and queued up the footage on my phone. I watched it once more, not because I needed convincing. I'd already replayed it enough to know every frame by heart, but to steel myself. Rose came into the kitchen a little after 8, hair still damp from the shower, phone in hand. She mumbled a good morning and started pouring cereal. "Sit down," I said. She looked up at me, eyebrows pinched. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. I just turned my phone toward her and tapped play. The living room filled the screen. Our couch, our wine glasses, her, and him. I didn't say a word while it played. Didn't narrate, didn't ask her to explain. Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Then she set it down slowly, eyes locked on the phone. I watched her face shift. Confusion. Realization. And then that quick flash of panic you can't hide when you've been caught. How? She started, her voice trailing off, as if the right words might still save her. I let the clip finish. Then I locked the screen and set the phone down between us. "You want to tell me who he is?" I asked, my voice steady enough to scare even myself. She shook her head, like maybe refusing to answer would undo what I'd seen. "It's not what it looks like," she said. I almost laughed. Not what it looks like. That was the best she could do? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move toward her. I just leaned back, because the silence was heavier than anything I could have shouted. And in that silence, she started talking. The first words out of her were scattered, half-formed things, as if speed could make up for the lack of sense. "He's just a friend. It was nothing. You've been distant." Each excuse tripped over the last, piling up until they became one long blur. She wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. Her hands fidgeted with the spoon, with the edge of the cereal box, with anything that wasn't me. When I didn't respond right away, she tried another angle. "I was lonely, okay? You've been so wrapped up in work, in everything else. I needed someone to talk to." I let the words hang there, not agreeing, not disagreeing, just waiting. She filled the quiet with more rambling. How it was a mistake, how she'd had too much wine, how it wasn't planned. Then, as if realizing the timeline didn't match, she added, "He came over once before, but nothing happened that time." I thought about that Thursday clip, the one with the wine glasses, and felt my jaw tighten. She noticed, because her voice started to crack. I swear it didn't mean anything. I don't even care about him like that. I leaned forward just enough for her to see my eyes clearly. "You brought him into our home," I said, my voice low, deliberate. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, the excuses stopped. It was like she realized there was no version of this where she came out clean. But instead of owning it, she whispered, "Can't we just forget it happened?" Forget? Like I could erase the image of her on that couch, of his hand on her, of her leading him down our hallway? "No," I said. Just that one word. But it was enough. I didn't yell, I didn't throw things. I didn't give her the dramatic blow-up she might have been expecting. I think that unsettled her more than anything. I couldn't shout. After that morning, I barely spoke to her. We moved around each other like strangers passing in a hallway. Meals were eaten in silence. Texts were reduced to one-word replies about bills or schedules. The air in the house felt heavy, stale, like a room no one had opened in years. 2 days later, I left work early and drove straight to an attorney's office. I didn't make an appointment, I just walked in and said I needed to talk to someone about ending my marriage. The receptionist slid a clipboard toward me, her voice polite, but her eyes sharp. The kind that had seen 100 versions of me walk through those doors. The lawyer was direct. She asked the right questions, the ones that stripped away emotion and boiled everything down to facts. Joint accounts, property division, no kids home full time. When she asked if there was a cause I wanted documented, I told her yes. Infidelity. It felt clinical, signing those papers. No shaking hands, no lump in my throat. Just a quiet resolve. The kind that comes when you know there's nothing worth saving. That night, I slid the envelope across the table to Rose without ceremony. She stared at it like it might bite her, then flipped it open and scanned the first page. Her face drained of color. "You're serious?" she asked. "I was serious the moment I saw that video," I said. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to plead, but I stood before she could speak. I didn't trust myself to hear whatever she was about to say. The next morning, I started looking for apartments. I found the apartment in less than a week. It wasn't anything glamorous, just a modest one-bedroom on the second floor of a quiet brick building, far enough from our old house that I wouldn't have to drive past it every day. The place smelled faintly of fresh paint. The carpet was new, and the kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people. But it was mine. When I signed the lease, the landlord handed me the keys and asked if I needed the lock changed. I told him yes, and I meant it in more ways than one. The first night I slept there, I didn't hear the hum of cameras, the soft click of motion sensors, or the faint buzz of alerts on my phone. I didn't wake up wondering what might be happening in the next room. The walls were bare, the shelves empty, but the silence was clean. I left most of the furniture at the house. I didn't want the couch, the bed, the coffee table, not after what I'd seen. I bought a secondhand armchair, a plain wooden table, and a mattress that came rolled up in a box. Everything fit into a single moving van. People talk about starting over like it's a grand thing, a sudden burst of freedom. But for me, it was quieter than that. It was sitting on the floor my first evening with a takeout container and no one to explain myself to. It was looking around and realizing there wasn't a single corner in that apartment tied to a memory I didn't want. I still had the camera system, packed it up in a box and shoved it in the back of the closet. Not because I'd ever use it again, but because part of me wanted the reminder. I'd installed those cameras to protect my house. I didn't realize they'd end up protecting me from years more of living beside someone who'd already left in every way that mattered. And now, in this little apartment, no cameras, no alerts, no shadows to watch, I finally felt safe.